Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm Andrea Tosten, and I'm overjoyed to have She Blinded Them with Science showing in the Art Thou Beck Gallery. And hopefully everyone had the chance to do a walkthrough. If not, that's okay. We have a slideshow that's going to be running behind us on the screen during the talk. And so I want to go ahead and set the tone for the evening by reading a very short excerpt from The Last Year of Malcolm X, The Evolution of a Revolutionary by George Brightman. I'm going to be reading from the Basic Unity Program of the Organization of Afro-American Unity that was started by Malcolm X after his return from Mecca. It's Section 2, Reorientation. In order to keep the Afro-American enslaved, it was necessary to limit our thinking to the shores of America, to prevent us from identifying our problems with the problems of other peoples of African origin. This made us consider ourselves an isolated minority without allies anywhere. The Organization of Afro-American Unity will develop in the Afro-American people a keen awareness of our relationship with the world at large and clarify our roles, rights, and responsibilities as human beings. We can accomplish this goal by becoming well-informed concerning world affairs and understanding that our struggle is part of a larger world struggle of oppressed peoples against all forms of oppression. We must change the thinking of the African American by liberating our minds through the study of philosophies and psychologies, cultures and languages that did not come from our racist oppressors. Provisions are being made for the study of languages such as Swahili, Hausa, and Arabic. These studies will give our people access to ideas and history of mankind at large, and thus increase our mental scope. We can learn much about Africa by reading informative books and by listening to the experiences of those who have traveled there. But many of us can travel to the land of our choice and experience for ourselves. The Organization of Afro-American Unity will encourage the African American to travel to Africa, the Caribbean, and to other places where our culture has not been completely crushed by brutality and ruthlessness. It is in that vein that we are gathered this evening. And I am also overjoyed and super excited to be here with these three phenomenal women in discussion. I'm going to go ahead and give some brief introductions, starting from my left, going to my right. So we have with us this evening, pharmacist, patient care advocate, and author, Dr. Ashley Wade. Photographer, artist, and organizer, Ms. Classi Nance. Actor, director, and museum specialist, Dr. Marta Torres. Thank you so much for joining me tonight in conversation. And so we'll get into it, and I'm just gonna ask the three of you to each share your perspectives on She Blinded Them with Science, and ask me any questions that come up, and I would be happy to answer them, and also may have some questions that come up from me. Whoever wants to go first.
I absolutely loved your exhibit, She Blinded Them with Science, because that's absolutely true. When you do research into African culture, African spirituality, that's where the root of our culture is science. And it's very pure, it's very essential, and it takes research to get there. So it may not make sense when you read it first off, she blinded them with science. It may not be as obvious, but once you do your research into different theologies, different psychologies of African history, it leads you directly to science. So when I saw it, I was like, absolutely, yes indeed. And then to see the different depictions of infinity was just beautiful. And so succinct, creative, and it said a lot with a little bit of words. So I gravitated a lot to it, and it really connected to the things that I'm researching and reading, and it all made sense and equaled out to, yes, absolutely. She blinds them with science every day.
I'll go next. When I first looked into the space, my brain is always so museum specialist, right? Galleries, art. I'm walking and I'm like, this space is beautiful. Just the way everything was laid out, the lighting, and then the complexities hidden within the simplicity, right? When we're looking at these, like this showing right behind me, this piece, you think circles, you think it's very clean, it's very organized, you think it's very simple to look at, but when you start to go in depth of what it could mean, of the writing within the circles, of that complex, layered, nuanced work, it's absolutely stunning. And it also, I was mentioning earlier, it makes me think about how we break with the tradition of thinking linearly, right? That's a very much westernized, our kind of idea, like we're taught to think in linear spaces and linear ways. And when I see circles, I think that's much more grounding and true to who we are. It's much more American Indian or Native Indigenous. It's very much coming into contact with ourselves. It's coming for a soul and goal. And that's how we learn, naturally, organically. And I can go on and on and on. But when I first looked at it, I'm like, yes. And then the title made even more sense to me, because science, although complex, is beautiful and can be simple and straightforward when you have an understanding for it. But the delicacy in it and the beauty in it, it's throughout your whole work in this exhibition. So beautiful work.
Yes, I forgot to turn my mic on. Sorry guys, thank you kindly. She introduced me. I was going to tell you my name, but I am Classi. I'm going to tell you again. For me, it brought up initially, this is maybe the third time I've seen it. So initially what it brought up for me was you being in the canon with the visual artists who use repetition and sameness to tell a story of the ground and the dirt and the darkness being exactly what it says, the nurturing that carries us through continuously. So like, she blinded us with science, the idea, and we were talking about this like with your body is not your body is not an apology, medical apartheid. We were talking about the idea that so much experimentation is a terrible word, that's not the word, so much like torture and physical beyond harm was done to especially Black women, and so much was learned from that. And the idea that our bodies were dismembered and horrified and just all kinds of heinous things, and that idea still carries from generation to generation, but also that idea that our cellular structure always has within us this like repeating cycle and this regenerating cycle of what we need. And so it's like with this work, and like I said like this because I like to look at the work too. With this work, it kind of like I was saying that Candy, like it's like that Lorna Simpson vibe, right? So she has that repetitive nature of every frame is almost the same, but there's slightly different nuances. As a caregiver, it's like, you know, you have, if you are a caregiver and you're also like I'm a biological parent caregiver, right? And so 3 of my children have the same DNA per se, because same mother, same father. However, there's differences. And in order to nurture those differences, to like surround something and to make that something develop into like what we see, is like this idea that I think the repetition continues to bring, and the idea that inspiration never gets it done. repetition in a certain set of circumstances is what gets it done. And then you can, like, that idea of experimentation outside of it. But like, you're using the same forms and then you're going outside of it, right? Like, you're using the same type of stencil and then you're going over it. So you have a certain set of circumstances and then you're growing. And I think that is, I could go on, but I think that is what ultimately was my first permeating idea.
Thank y'all so much. I'm really deeply touched by everything that y'all said. I was really inspired. I had actually read this book when I was in high school, and then read it again a couple of years ago. And my mother is from Jamaica, and I still have cousins there. And my family and I, we actually got the chance to go to Jamaica at the end of May, early June for 9 days and stay with my cousins, Tosten and Gungu. And it was just such a wonderful experience. It was wonderful to see them again and stay with them. Gungu cooked beautiful Jamaican meals for us every single night. He's like a chef. And so Eric got to have the traditional, the dish of Jamaica, ackee and saltfish, and it was just a wonderful experience. And my cousin Tosten, actually, she used to work in the tourism industry and has all these wonderful friends and connections, and set it up to where we were able to go to the foothills of the Blue Mountains and go to Nanny Falls and see Queen Nanny's grave and be in the same land that the ancestors were in fighting the British. And I just had all the emotions. And so that trip really also informed the work, as well as a lot of research that I've done on Queen Nanny. And so the words that are in the spiral patterns, it's 4 words. They're Kromanti words. Kromanti is the language of the Jamaican Maroons. That's heavily influenced by Twi, which is a Ghanaian language. And the 4 words are ohemmaa, which means Queen Mother. Abeng, which is a horn made out of animal horn. Gumbay, which is a drum. And actually there is a Taino or Arawakan word, xaymaca, which means land of wood and water, which is where they believe the name Jamaica came from. And so as I was writing these words in the spiral, I definitely was thinking of water and the sounds of the instruments, the trip, and just so many different emotions. And I also referring back to the excerpt I read earlier. It was like, oh yeah, I really this is in my family, this is in my blood. And so hearing your reference, Classi, to the DNA, and thinking about how the Jamaican Maroons established a society outside of the slaveocracy. It's something that we have to think about doing today. And also the colors, I want to bring attention to the colors that you see. It's from the African diaspora, and also in the smaller spirograph images, those are the colors of the Black Liberation flag that Marcus Garvey came up with. And when we think about it, Marcus Garvey was influenced by the Jamaican Maroons. And then Marcus Garvey heavily influenced the civil rights movement. People like Malcolm X. Malcolm X's parents were Garveyites, and on and on. So there's that, just that circle, that cycle that continues on. And I recently just finished reading this book by Professor Werner Zips out of Vienna called Queen Nanny's Soulful Warriors, the Jamaican African Experience. And I actually hadn't finished reading it at the time that I finished the pieces for this exhibition. And there was reference to a lot of circular dances and a lot of that came over from Ghana, and circular ceremonies that this word kenda, meaning to gather under a circle, like the umbrellas, the ceremonial umbrellas that came out of Ghana, the circular tree. And then I was like, oh my gosh. So yes, as you were referring to earlier, Dr. Torres, it really did come through. But I don't want to ramble on and on. Do you have any other questions about the exhibition?
No, I think as you were talking, a lot of the questions that I had were kind of answered, and that sense of, you mentioned diaspora, like that sense of almost like that longing and that connection, and that it really is felt throughout the whole exhibition, like the immersing yourself into that. Because especially if you are from the diaspora, it's this perpetual longing for a place that belongs to you, but it's also removed from you in some way, that you can kind of almost touch but not quite grasp and hold on to unless you're taken there and you're shown and you're brought into these spaces, and you can almost, the feel of that in these pieces is, it's infused with that, and that connection, that aha, like this is mine and I'm going to. Was there a lot of that kind of feeling when you were working on this?
Yes, because a lot of times, because I've only been to Jamaica a handful of times, and the Jamaican nation language wasn't really spoken heavily in my family, and so I approached the language and the culture kind of from the outside looking in, and doing all of this study, it really does help me feel more grounded, and it's like this question's reminding me of, I recently listened to a talk by Jamal Cyrus when he had his exhibition at the Fort Worth Modern in the Focus Gallery. And in this talk, he was saying that there's a tradition of self-education in the Black community. And that's what I really feel like I'm doing as I continue to create new bodies of work, is continuing self-education. And really, I feel like my trajectory changed when I know James Jazz Martis, I see him here. We did an exhibition together at the Oak Cliff Cultural Center back in 2019. And he asked me to write the Jamaican nation language in calligraphy. And I was like, oh, well, I don't know how to speak it. I can understand it, which I always am amazed by too. I can always understand it, but I can't speak it. And from then on, I was like, I will not have any blocks. There's so much information, so many paths to go down. So my mom's from Jamaica, my dad's from Louisiana, and I love the entry points of two women in particular, Queen Nanny for my Jamaican side, and Marie Laveau for my Louisiana side. And I also, through those explorations, get into the African spiritual practices of voodoo and obeah. And those spiritual practices are representations of all of these African tribes being brought together and having to figure out how to survive. and in many cases being the very basis of revolution and a way to establish societies outside of the slaveocracy. And that reminds me, at the end of the book I mentioned earlier by Professor Werner Zips, I read the epilogue by Muta Baruka, I believe that's how you say his name, formerly Alan Hope, based out of Kingston, Jamaica. I believe he's in the 70s now. And I was so surprised, so surprised to see that's who had written the epilogue. And I was reading it just last week, like Thursday or Wednesday, and I had to put the book down for a second after I read this part where he said the difference between the revolution or the rebellion of the Jamaican Maroons and the Haitian Revolution is that the Haitians had it in their minds that it was imperative to free all Africans once they freed themselves, and that they were going to start with America. So they invaded America, starting in Louisiana. So what? I was like, oh my gosh, all of my studies just keep like circling back around to each other. And he also said though too, since I keep using the word Maroons, he said to be sure that we understand that when we use the word Maroon, we understand that we're talking about Africans. That the word Maroon is not what the Africans called themselves. It simply means Africans who escaped and went to the mountains. But we stop droning on. Sure.
I have a question. I think it's based on in the comment, based on what you were saying about systems and communities outside of the slaveocracy.
Yes.
And so also you said, I don't remember the person's name, but you said they invited you in to do some calligraphy work, right?
Yes.
So for a show. And then you mentioned
James Martis, yes.
And then you mentioned that you studied Marie Laveau. So systems of outside of slaveocracy, right? And then the institution and system of art, and how that has, my question is, how has the institution and system of art led you to tie together for you ways of being outside of, like, I don't know what structure you would talk, but like outside, because you said you've been learning all kinds of new things. So how has like the system of art been a part of, like, not that you're a slave, like, but that, what's the word? We didn't pre-talk, so we don't have shared language around this. So,
there's an institutionalized way to approach almost anything. That's just the way we are in society and the way our systems are built. So yes. So how did maybe break out of that system?
Thank you.
Well, I always, I started creating art from as long as I can remember, and my first love was drawing, and so and actually handwriting, and so it's interesting that now I've brought the two together, but I just never thought of it in terms of a capitalistic pursuit. But I recently, it was just last February. That was the first time that my art had blatantly been for sale in a gallery situation. And it actually was a really pleasant experience. Nell Potasnik, the director there, was really wonderful, and everything organically happened, and I was just represented for just a short period of time, so it wasn't like an ongoing thing. So it was nice to just be able to dip a toe into that and see how it felt without and I didn't go crazy or anything. I didn't start worrying about what my public's gonna want me to create or anything strange like that. So it worked out okay, and I'm still able to. And I mean, just to go back to the foundations of this, as I continue to study and look into the ancestors who came before me, it just grounds me that much more, and yes, helps me to understand that being creative, it's not only in my artistic pursuits, but in being in community and figuring out ways, because these are skills we are needing to be able to think out of. I mean, the slaveocracy is not gone. We have to think about these things present day, everybody.
I do have a question. One thing that I would like to bring special attention to is that you keep repeating your research. Mm-hmm. And, you know, there's different stories that you've read and books that you've researched and special people. And what comes to mind is purpose. So did you ever think, when did you realize that you would basically use what you researched to create and teach people? When did you connect that to purpose?
Well, I think the first time that I really started to have more intention with it was definitely James or Jazz Martis's exhibition, Ours Together. And then when I really think about it, though, I definitely am not doing anything in a pedagogical or a pedagogy kind of way. I'm not trying to be didactic or spell anything out for anyone. It's not, as everyone can see, it's not representational. So there's room for people to look, read words, and find their own way in. And that's how I like to approach it. There's some education there, definitely, but definitely not in a way that is pedagogy. Not to me.
Just walking in your purpose, right? Just walking in your purpose. It's what we all strive to do. I hope, and that we stumble into our purpose sometimes in that way. So amazing.
Yeah, I have a question about the stumbling into the purpose, and also thank you. The idea of stumbling into purpose, and then you said, like, did you do it on purpose? And then also, but you said you've been writing since you fell in love with handwriting as a child. Mm-hmm. So even though you didn't have what do you mean you didn't have, you're not didactic or a purpose, like you don't have a theme, you don't have a theme you want somebody to take away, you want them to make their own decisions?
I have a basic theme that I want people to take away, yes, but just not, there's not a, spelling it out, like this is what you should think. I'm not preaching it. Like it's an invitation to look deeper.
And I think that's perfect. You know, when it comes to art and creativity, that's educational too. And it gives people a chance to, you know, create their own narrative.
Say that preachers are not preaching where I'm from, in the Black church. We lay it out and you get to come feast from the table. And so, but if you can't cook, nobody wants to come feast. So the idea that you've been sitting at a table, a proverbial table, making things, but being a maker, right, in the midst of all, you know, life and all the things that happen, and then taking that making and putting conversation, putting theme, putting purpose, or words rather, because it had purpose to it. And then, like, I don't know the timeline, but fast forwarding to the Marie Laveau work, And then the Queen Nanny of the Maroons work, and those, you know, your maternal and paternal people, right? But you going to Jamaica at this time, and so it's like that lines up. And so I think that my comment is that whether it was like planned or not, where we're from, it's like this Odu, this script on your life. And so like that idea that you're a meticulous being who clearly has a love for sitting with it and staying with it, and that linear thinking, that pattern thinking, that idea that art is the conversation, but that idea also that it's not a fly-by-night idea, right? This takes intention, this takes sitting here, this takes the doing, this takes the making. And so like, I always like, speaking of preaching, I preach. I believe in propaganda. I believe in preaching. I wanted to go back, I'm an abolitionist though. We were talking about new ways of being. But yeah, so the idea that, to me, what it feels like I'm being preached is that the routines have been in us, and we have seen them from our grandmothers, from our mothers, from our aunts, and we sit down at the table. You said handwriting, something so regular, right?
Yeah.
Like something so like everyday, something so like, it's kind of like we were talking about how, I was talking about how we all did. But that idea though of putting yourself on, of the routine, of the ritual. So like the historian was saying that even you want to know that the Maroons are Africans who are in the hills who were just enslaved, yes, thank you. I got it. So just a slave slavery, but like they're also seeing the patterns of the people before them to inform what they then can put out, because somebody taught you handwriting and somebody taught you how to stay at the table, and then somebody else, John, years later said, and I don't know, like I'm not saying also, Andrea, you don't have a huge history, like not to, who's your resume, 2, 3 things. But John's saying, and also, can we talk about Marie Laveau here? Can we talk about Nanny of the Maroons here? And that sitting, that waiting, that staying, that repetition already being at the table. Like we talked about Zora Neale Hurston and that being of the people. And I think that for me, this body of work and the other bodies of work I've seen you produce feel like very much of the people. And that idea that like that I am because we are, but not like on this cute little level, on this like inserting myself on a cellular level. Like it's not just a little thing. It's like how I see this structure continuing, and I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna be in the doing. So I appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
I like how your brain works. Like you make so many different connections, and then those connections just keep connecting to everything.
Yes, that's why I have you 3 phenomenal women here. I knew.
Like we're like,
Y'all had, I was like, yes, I couldn't wait. Well, mentioning Zora Neale Hurston, this is a great segue into our next section. And I'll just speak a little bit too on some other things that I was reading about last week, and just was like, I gotta put the book down, walk around the room again. Zora Neale Hurston, if she hadn't done what she did, I wouldn't have anything to research, because the way that she fearlessly went in with the people, did initiations with different voodoo doctors, went in to a compound, the Leeward Maroons Society, and went wild hog hunting, and sat there with Colonel Rowe, and when he was trying to invite her to a stage ceremonial dance, she was like, no, I know about that. This is in January, so I already know that it's not the time. January 6th is a Kojo Day. I already know. So no, I don't want to see that dance. So without her, I wouldn't have even had the research, and without Alice Walker in the 1970s, reintroducing her to society, she would have just been buried. So I'd like to now ask the three of you to each talk about someone who's been left out of history who's special to you, and anyone can start.
I can start. The name, and it makes sense. I'm gonna talk a little, but it's gonna make sense. I promise. Just stay with me. The person I wanted to highlight in history, he is a polarizing figure in Puerto Rico. I'm a Texan Mexican. That's what I call it. I'm Texan born, but I'm half Mexican and Puerto Rican, and I had the lovely pleasure and honor of growing up in Puerto Rico. So. I wanted to mention Pedro Albizu Campo, the Honorable Pedro Albizu Campos. You probably have never heard this man's name before. He has been not erased on purpose, well, a little bit on purpose, from the history books. And in Puerto Rico, he's very polarizing. He was the head of the nationalist movement of Puerto Rico, so the movement of independence. He was jailed in 1950 for leading this movement of independence in Puerto Rico. But he's also one of the first black men, because he's a black Puerto Rican, and yes, you can be black and Puerto Rican, it's not mutually exclusive. He was one of the first black men admitted to Harvard Law School, right? Graduated from Harvard Law, practiced law in Puerto Rico, gathered the people, and made this movement because he understood that Puerto Rico had so much more available to her than just being continuously passed on from nation to nation, from empire to empire. And he believed in that. He believed in the strength of the island and the people who were there. But he has been systematically kind of erased here in the US from books. And in Puerto Rico, you know, we are taught history a certain way, right? And we are taught that nationalism and trying to be independent, it's bad. You don't want to do that. We will suffer if we do that. I'm not saying yay or nay. If you want my personal opinion, come ask me after. I'm happy to fill you in on that. But I wanted to mention him because he has been erased not just as a big figure in Puerto Rico, but as a black Puerto Rican. That is very common, and it's a thread in Latin America and some of our Caribbean brothers and sisters. We like to erase the fact that we can be Mexican and Puerto Rican and Colombian, and ethnicity and race are two distinct things, right? They're very different things, and we can be both, right? I can't sit up here, I'm not a white passing woman, right? But my family, most of my family members are. So when I check a box, like we all have to, check a box, I don't check what my sibling may check, because I don't look like that at first glance. I know what I look like. I see it, right? I see my ancestry and I'm proud of it. But when I'm talking to extended family members, it's like, well, what would you say that? You're not black, you're Puerto Rican. And I'm like, well, have you seen me? When I walk down the street, I am not received in this manner. And I was reading over the holidays this fantastic book, and I am a teacher, y'all. I am an educator. I brought a little book. I'm recommending a reading to y'all. It's called Racial Innocence, Unmasking Latino Anti-Black Bias and the Struggle for Equality. And it's talking about how we, as the people of the global majority, right, are not doing the work of coming together the way we should be. Trauma, harm, pain. I understand wanting to stay away from things that cause this, but staying away from our inherited blackness, which is imbued within all of our histories in Latin America and the Caribbean, is a mistake, because we don't want to be fingered as other, right? But we already are. So this book is deconstructing that. It's talking about, oh, I'm Mexican, I can't be racist. Yes, you can. I've had conversations with a couple uncles and aunts who are not happy whenever I bring something up, right? Because we perpetuate harm. So it's time that we stop doing that and start seeing our commonalities and our differences as something to celebrate and enjoy, and talk about our shared history rather than what makes us different. So highlighting Pedro Bispo Campos and the work that he did. He died in obscurity in a jail cell in San Juan, Puerto Rico, being experimented on for radiation therapy. That's what ultimately killed him. And he has been, erased from history books, and he's being almost forgotten in Puerto Rico. And I just wanted to bring that up as a Black Puerto Rican man and everything that he did and tried to do for us in Puerto Rico. So that's the person I was bringing up. I thought about that as I was walking through this exhibition. As I'm reading this, I'm like, we need to start dismantling and transforming the way we think about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm a woman of many mics. I don't like to get the mic because I want to freestyle when I get it, so I'd rather not. But I am a mean-ass freestyler, in case anybody want to know. Okay, the people in history. I was really trying to narrow it down, so I'm gonna narrow it down to a few. I'm an abolitionist. I am a people person. Angelo said, I come as one, I stand as 10,000. I will not name 10,000 people, but what I will do is say we have always lived in systems that operate outside of slaveocracy, is a new word I learned today. Or city governments. Juanita Craft in South Dallas, she said, if you don't remember anything, remember I raised hell. She registered over 500 voters on foot in counties here and 100 miles out. And so I speak her name because that was no small feat. We were walking. There was more than just dogs. There was, and there was, she registered the people. And not just did she register them, she took care of them. That was the end goal. She set them up, she created the community. But what she did, as well as what Miss Ella Becker would say, is we don't have a movement of leaders because we don't need them. And so that's what we've always done. The candy lady has always been the person you can go to who watched your kids and you got candy at her house. The tutor who was really good at math, they've been a beast and can remember every number, they've always got you together. The person who could sew and had the hand-me-downs, they always had a place for you. The person who had a lawn service, or before we were in capitalism, knew how to take care of things, they always had a place for you to learn skills. So the idea that we are all, most of the time it's matriarchs, right? So it's aunts, it's grandmothers, it's, I'm the daughter of Vicki Washington, I'm the granddaughter of Lois Louise, I'm the great-granddaughter of Willie Mae, and on and on and on. And because of the way in which they taught me how to exist, and they taught my mother how to exist and my grandmothers how to exist, and everybody has that. I can meet this right here, I can meet this person, this right here, I can meet her right here, and we all have a shared language of communal care. That's because our people have all, we're our networks. In organizing, we say, who are your 7? I don't really need, there definitely is a need for a larger figure, but cadre happens on a level of 7 people. Cadre is small organizations. If you go to Dallas City Hall right now, if 7 of you send an email 7 days straight, I guarantee your issue will be addressed. Small numbers, because the idea is we keep working, but there's always been somebody who pulls us to the side and says, baby, don't you think you need to eat? Don't you think you should sleep? Don't you think you should just rest just a little bit? So the idea that, like Miss Ella Baker said, who's somebody I'd highlight, that we don't have to have a world of large leaders, because we all are making our own communities and leading our own spaces. So yeah.
Thank you. Wonderful.
I want to bring highlight to Angela Davis. She's so phenomenal, and I think what's so important about her life is that she lived. Okay. A lot of our leaders have been murdered and assassinated. I mean, I don't have to start with Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Huey Newton, have all been assassinated, but Angela Davis, she basically beat the system. She was wanted by the FBI She was framed, and she was acquitted of all the charges that were set up against her. And so I love the fact that she is still able to speak. She's still able to draw large amounts of people. She's still able to inspire us to be liberated in our minds and in our communities. But the fact that, you know, she's able to live to tell the story is a lot in our community. So I just want to honor, I do want to honor her. I want to honor, you know, everything that she went through to be able to speak to people the way that she does. She's a world traveler. She traveled to Cuba. She traveled to Puerto Rico. So she really connected with the people. And I think that's notable. She also studied philosophy, and a lot of our leaders are philosophical when it comes to, you know, understanding the psyche of African people and understanding why we were so easily manipulated. You do have to understand psychology. You do have to kind of understand philosophy. And I think that's one thing that's missing in the way that we study now. We study things that are finite. We study linear, math, English, but we really don't dive into like the virtues. So I really want to honor Angela Davis and her courage to study abroad and study philosophy and really try to get people to understand that, you know, in order to liberate the people, we have to liberate our minds first. So that means we need to study, we need to research. Not only do we need to research, we need to teach. So I do want to highlight her. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, that's so wonderful. I'm gonna have to go back and ask all of y'all again and make sure that I dig deeper into each of these people. And actually, Angela Davis is going to be in town next Tuesday, speaking at Moody Hall. Super excited. Yeah, she's a person that also, to go back to what Classi was talking about, wants us to think in the collective and not always be looking to one person to lead us, but yeah, to remember that we're in a collective. So that's beautiful. Oh my gosh. Well, I'll tie everything together here and wrap it up with a few things that have come to mind for me. Papa Legba, Anansi, and Brer Rabbit. Those three figures from Black history, the Caribbean, America, are coming to mind for me because one of the mottos of the Jamaican Maroons was "play the fool to catch wise." And so that's in the trickster tradition that these three figures that I'm mentioning from folklore, voodoo, obeah, I think are a good way to end our talk. Do we have any other questions from here before I open it up to? Well, Zora Neale Hurston, and the whole exhibition was about Queen Nanny of the Jamaican Maroons, so I snuck a couple in there, and then I snuck Alice Walker in there to highlight that she, because I think she even had a hand in bringing Ida B. Wells back into our consciousness too, but anyway, all right, well, I think we have time for a few questions from the audience if there are any questions that any of you have. Yes, right here in front.
Andrea, I'd like to ask about your use of paper as your I just noticed a lot of paper in your work. Could you speak about that?
Sure. I really fell in love with paper. As I mentioned earlier, I loved drawing and handwriting early on, so works on paper, of course, are just my jam. And when I think about paper too, I think about the quality of it, how strong it is, but how it also appears fragile at the same time. So I love thinking about the ephemeral nature of it as well, and how it, in a very understated way, will bring that to each body of work as a theme that runs through, it's been a theme that's run through all of the bodies of work so far. So yeah, I love to see what it can do. It's fun doing the large scale origami as well. And so that's it. Yeah, the strength and the fragility together. Yes, you're in the back.
Medicine, like as a kind of a type of spiritual healing in a lot of practices. So I'm wondering if you have any background as to if that tradition, if you've been, if you've seen any of that or experienced that through your research with voodoo or with, African American folk tradition, or because I'm not as familiar with those traditions, but I do know that that's very common throughout Latin America and South Asia, and it's a very kind of universal human thing that if you write something with intention over and over and over again, it takes you inward, but then it also manifests something outward.
Mm-hmm. Well, I definitely, while I was writing the words over and over again, did feel a rhythm and a chant and sounds happening. And I think it was a combination of intentional but also unconscious, just because, I worked at the Crow Collection of Asian Art a long time ago, and the Tibetan monks would come to town and they would do their mandalas. And that was one thing that I think is always in the back of my mind. It has influenced my work. And I think, yes, in my studies and continued studies, I'm sure that it's in there somewhere. Yes, over here.
Hello, my name is Olivia.
Hi, Olivia.
So nice to hear from you and your good speakers on the work that you put together. I recently moved here, so I missed the first half. I'm so sorry. Getting used to the traffic here.
Perpetual.
Touched on so many things that really touched me wholeheartedly. This idea of repetition, like leading to expansion in a way, this idea of self-educating yourself, and this idea of looking at your lineage and language and how important that can be to expansion. I've been looking towards like traditional geometries to express like periods of transition. Do you think you can speak to that, or do you have any experience with that within your work, of these periods in your life that you're recording?
Traditional geometries. As I have continued to read, because I used to read a lot of fiction, and it's been within the last few years, I would say like since maybe 2016 or so, that I've really been focusing in on a lot of study about Black liberation, socialism, and then, like I mentioned, after the exhibition before, then into Marie Laveau and Queen Nanny, and therefore voodoo and obeah. And what I'm realizing is, as I continue to read and the references start to overlap with one another, I'm starting to find out that that yes, it is starting to happen, and I'm starting to have it happen in a more conscious way, whereas before, and probably mostly right now, it's been unconscious that it's been happening.
Thank you.
Welcome. Yes.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. It's really been great just listening to you all, and good to see you. Love your work. Andrea, just the formal qualities of these pieces, I know a little more now just listening to this great conversation, but just the formal qualities, these things sizzle and pop. When I'm looking at the circles, okay, with the words, abeng and gumbay, those are musical words, right? I'm not seeing it now, but you almost see electricity with the way that the words written in cursive. I keep seeing them like it's something that's spinning. And I almost hear a sizzle and a pop. And then you have, of course, the sort of spirographic images with those. It's almost like music and gears moving around. I haven't heard a lot about the formal qualities of them, but it's very rich, the whole thing, because now I know a little more about what's behind it, but just the formality of them. The formal qualities are also quite delicious. Really great.
Thank you. I was,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Childhood. As kids, all the time you spend trying to learn to write a cursive your name, or even whatever. All that practicing. Of course, none of us ever made anything near as beautiful as you can do it. But also the childhood exercise in spirographs and this refinement, this returns. I remember my childhood a lot looking at these. They're sizzle on top.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, I was thinking about, as I mentioned earlier, the sounds of the abeng and the gumbay, which were used in battle against the British. And I was also thinking about the fact that Queen Nanny, being an obeah woman, they called that her great science, and hence the name, she blinded them with science. And then also, of course, we think about science like chemistry and biology, and the things we think about studying in school. And so I have a spirograph, and I was like, ooh, it's making me think of like atoms, and like the parts of the atoms, like the protons and the electrons and neutrons, and like what's going on in space when stars are being made, and all of those types of things. So I felt like the spirograph patterns would communicate that for me. Right here.
Yes, I wanted to comment on the craftsmanship. It's impeccable. And I would like to know, when you are creating these pieces, it doesn't look like there's a lot of room for error. So, what I would like to know, were you at a meditative state where it was just very consistent and you were just kind of just going through the motions, where you really did not have to think about it? Or were there mistakes made? Because I don't see any mistakes.
Well, I have line guides. So I put the line guides on my light table and then turn the page, and there weren't any mistakes. But like, if I on the graphite pieces with the lettering, which is in round hand, which came from British, so it's on purpose, like the British handwriting style, because Jamaica was a colony of Britain. But there weren't any mistakes, but with the spirograph, there was a couple of times where the Prismacolor color pencil would slip off of the track and make a little mark, and I left it there on a couple of them. So little Easter eggs, see if y'all can find it. So, and because perfectionism is a problem of mine, I do just let that go. It's like, it's art, Andrea, it's not a math project, so let's go with it. But yes, I do, the way that I work is I go into a research and skill gathering phase, and then I kind of fugue state it out. I'll just like turn on some music. I love Solange, Erykah Badu, and Sade, people like that, and just fugue state it out, and however many consecutive days it takes it. And it does feel very meditative, and yes, it felt like a chant. And I think we have time for one more question. Here.
I'm sorry. though.
The video piece?
And I'm curious, I want to know about the collaboration between you and your son.
I'm so happy that you asked about this, because I was like, oh, I want to talk about this video piece. And Sierra Bryant is here tonight too, who edited this video. And also made sure that it was looking tight and it was the focus, and that the film looked just how it's supposed to look in there. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And yes, I am so excited to be able to work with my oldest son, Deshaun Moore. He has done the music for 3 videos that we've done together now. And he sampled sounds. He tried to find the gumbay and the abeng and was not able to find those. But, so he sampled sounds and composed that piece. He's a brilliant percussionist, and so he his music theory is so good. And taking it back to the exhibition that Griff, that was at the Cooley Projects, he did the music on that. And it was Please Don't Drive Me, a song from the Zora Neale Hurston collection, because you know at the end of most of her anthropological books, she has music that she's collected in her journeys. And so I asked him to just pick whichever song he was connecting with at the end of that book, and he picked Please Don't Drive Me, and he played guitar and sang it and arranged it, and so beautiful. And so our collaborations are just so beautiful. It's like we're getting to be the visual and musical griots of our family this way. It's it's very, very special. Thank you for that question. Yeah, so and the distorted footage that's in the video is from our family trip to Jamaica earlier last year. And the zoetropes, that was fun making the, I wanted to experiment with animating the lettering, like in the rhythm of like what an abeng would do or a gumbay would do. So it was really fun to see what would happen, them going round and round. So yeah, thanks for that question. Oh my gosh. Everybody, thank you so much for attending, and thank you, wonderful, phenomenal women, for being in conversation with me tonight. Thank you.
The South House Cultural Center would like to say something.
I'm going to give you all my Russell Simmons. I'm not going to spend very much time up here. First of all, I want to thank this lovely panel for being here. Andrea, we're really grateful to have you here and have your work and to be able to show it. I saw her work for the first time a couple years ago at Art 214, and as soon as I could grab her and get her to do something, I was like, hey, I need you here. And I put her to the task, and so the work that you see is exemplary. It's fantastic. I continue to try to push the boundaries of the kind of work that we do here, and to show the breadth and the depth of what our culture can bring to the table. So very grateful to have you here. Grateful to have you all as well. Our motto here is Black Culture Celebrated. So it's very simple. That's what we do. That's the work we try to continue to move forward every single day. And so grateful to have you all here. Please come back for other programming that we have. Thank you all again, and God bless and good night.